The final rays of the setting sun bled across the horizon, painting the endless expanse of clouds beneath us in fiery strokes of orange, gold, and deep violet. It was the kind of breathtaking view that usually brought a sense of calm, a reminder of the vastness and beauty of the world. Yet, tonight, a subtle unease prickled at the back of my neck, a dissonance in the otherwise peaceful rhythm of the flight. Flight 367 from Los Angeles to the familiar, frenetic energy of New York. Another week, another deal to close. My routine. The hum of the Boeing 737 engines was a constant, almost comforting drone, a white noise that usually allowed me to drift into my thoughts or lose myself in a movie. I had just finished a bland airline dinner, the plastic tray now resting on the seatback in front of me, and was contemplating whether to try and get some sleep. My attention, however, kept being drawn to the passenger seated 2 rows ahead and across the aisle. He was a nondescript man in his early 40s, easily forgettable, if not for the palpable agitation radiating off him. His baseball cap was pulled low, obscuring his eyes, but I could see the tense set of his jaw and the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching in his lap. He shifted constantly in his seat, his gaze darting nervously between the front and back of the plane, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. I initially chalked it up to severe flight anxiety, something I'd witnessed many times before. But there was a manic quality to his movements, an undercurrent of something more volatile than mere fear. He'd mutter inaudible words to himself, and his leg bounced with a frantic energy that was starting to make the passengers around him visibly uncomfortable. I tried to dismiss my growing unease, forcing my attention back to the in-flight entertainment. But the image of his restless figure kept flickering at the edge of my vision, a discordant note in the symphony of the flight. Then the subtle shift escalated. He abruptly stood, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. No "excuse me," no acknowledgement of the passengers he was now blocking in the narrow aisle. Heads turned, a ripple of surprise and mild annoyance spreading through the cabin. He wasn't heading towards the restrooms at the back. His trajectory was fixed towards the front of the aircraft. The flight attendants were in the forward galley, their backs to the cabin, engrossed in their preparations. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't just nerves. This was something profoundly, dangerously off. He reached the door leading to the cockpit, and for a fleeting moment, a sliver of doubt flickered in my mind. Maybe he was ill, needed help. But then his attention snapped to the emergency exit door, just a few feet from the cockpit. The door that represented the only barrier between us and the crushing vacuum of the stratosphere. The sound of the latch being engaged was subtle, almost swallowed by the engine noise and the distant chatter. But my eyes were fixed on his hand. I saw the distinct movement as his fingers wrapped around the bright red handle and began to pull. Upwards, in that instant the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Time stretched, each fraction of a second an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum beat against the sudden, suffocating silence that had fallen over my thoughts. Pure, unadulterated terror seized me. The flight attendant's piercing scream ripped through the cabin like a sonic boom, shattering the illusion of normalcy. "He's trying to open the door." Her voice, raw with unfiltered terror, echoed through the suddenly hushed cabin, jolting everyone into horrified awareness. All eyes snapped towards the man who now stood with his back to us, his body straining as he wrestled with the emergency exit handle. I could see the veins bulging in his neck, the intense contortion of his face. A wave of collective panic surged through the plane. Gasps mingled with outright screams. A woman 2 rows behind me sobbed hysterically, burying her face in her hands. Children, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the palpable fear in their parents' eyes, began to cry their innocent questions. "Mommy, what's happening?" hanging heavy in the air. I stared at the man, then at the door. The physics of the situation hit me with brutal clarity. At this altitude, the pressure differential was immense. If that door opened even a crack, the explosive decompression would be catastrophic. Everything not bolted down, and many things that were, would be violently expelled into the frigid nothingness outside. Passengers, luggage, parts of the aircraft itself. The image was horrific, playing out in a terrifying montage in my mind. My brain, despite the surge of adrenaline, began to work with a frantic, almost detached precision. Distance, roughly 15 feet. Time, mere seconds, perhaps less. The flight. Attendants were scrambling towards him, their faces pale with shock, but he had a head start, and his size suggested a significant strength advantage. This wasn't a drill. This was real. This was happening. The urgency was critical, the margin for error non-existent. There was no time for protocol, no time to wait for someone else to act. This was a moment where inaction meant certain disaster. The air in the cabin felt thick, heavy with dread, the collective breath of over 100 people held captive by the actions of one unhinged individual. My body, operating on pure instinct, bypassed the paralysis of fear. I ignored the cacophony of screams and cries around me, the frantic energy of the unfolding crisis, narrowing my focus to the immediate threat. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, sharpening my senses, amplifying every detail. The metallic glint of the handle in his grip, the strain in his posture, the sheer impossibility of what he was attempting, it all coalesced into a single, overwhelming imperative. Stop him, now. A primal yell tore from my throat, a sound, born of fear and a sudden, fierce resolve, and I lunged forward, propelled by a desperate surge of energy. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest, but my focus remained absolute. Reach him, tackle him, prevent the unthinkable. I slammed into him with the full force of my momentum, the impact jarring both of us. A guttural grunt escaped his lips. As he stumbled forward, his grip on the door handle momentarily loosening, but not breaking. The dull thud of our collision echoed through the cabin, momentarily silencing some of the screams before they erupted again, laced with a fresh wave of terror. He was surprisingly sturdy, his weight shifting precariously, but his feet still planted. My initial tackle hadn't been enough to bring him down. The fight was on. He was indeed stronger than he looked, fueled by a manic energy that bordered on the superhuman. His arms flailed wildly, trying to dislodge me, his elbows jabbing back with surprising force. I clung to his oversized jacket, digging my fingers into the fabric, trying to pull him away from the door. Our bodies twisted and turned in the narrow aisle, a chaotic tangle of limbs and desperation, slamming against the armrests and tray tables of the adjacent seats, much to the renewed horror of the trapped passengers. The flight attendants, recovering from their initial shock, were now upon us. One grabbed his arm, her face a mask of strained determination, while the other yelled for assistance, her voice cracking with fear but still carrying an air of authority. "Everyone, stay calm. We need help here." "Help me!" "He's trying to open." "The door!" I roared, my voice hoarse and strained, the words barely audible above the pandemonium. I could feel his muscles straining against my grip, his breathing ragged and heavy. He thrashed violently, kicking backwards, one of his heels connecting sharply with my shin, a jolt of pain shooting up my leg. Then a large figure appeared at my side, the man I had noticed earlier, built like a brick wall. He grabbed the man's other arm with a steely grip. "I got him," he grunted, his voice firm and reassuring amidst the chaos. Another passenger, younger but equally determined, joined the fray, helping to restrain the man's legs, which were still, kicking furiously. Together the three of us wrestled with him, our combined strength slowly beginning to overpower his frantic resistance. His eyes, wide and unfocused, darted around the cabin, a terrifying mixture of rage and delusion. He mumbled incoherently, his words lost in the din, but the intent was chillingly clear. The confined space of the aisle amplified the struggle, each strained breath, each desperate movement, a stark reminder of the life-or-death stakes. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and the overwhelming sense of imminent catastrophe narrowly averted. Slowly, painstakingly, we managed to subdue him. The three of us, sweating and panting, finally wrestled him to the ground, pinning him against the floor of the aisle. The flight attendants, remarkably composed despite the trauma, were quick to act. One of them, a woman named Sarah, with eyes still wide with fear, fumbled in an emergency kit and quickly produced a pair of heavy-duty zip ties. With trembling hands, she secured his wrists, then his ankles, effectively incapacitating him. He continued to struggle, his muffled shouts now a pathetic whimper, his strained movements a chilling reminder of the utter chaos and danger we had just faced. But the immediate threat had passed. The door remained sealed. The integrity of the aircraft, for now, was intact. A collective, shuddering sigh of relief swept through the cabin, heavy with residual fear. The silence that followed was almost as unnerving as the screams had been, broken only by the distant hum of the engines and the ragged breaths of 100 relieved passengers. Tears flowed freely down many faces, not just from women and children, but from men too, their stoic facades crumbling in the face of what we'd all narrowly escaped. Passengers began to hug each other, strangers clinging to strangers, their relief palpable, a silent testament to the shared brush with mortality. The air, moments before thick with terror and the metallic scent of fear, now felt heavy with the collective weight of what had almost happened. Then the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone shaken but commendably firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. The situation in the cabin is now under control. We will be making an emergency landing at the nearest suitable airport. We anticipate being on the ground within the next 30 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation." The words were simple, yet they carried a profound weight, a promise of safety after a terrifying journey. The remainder of the flight was a surreal blur. The man, still bound and struggling weakly, was eventually moved to the very back of the plane, tucked away from the main cabin. Several burly passengers and the flight crew formed a silent, watchful perimeter around him, ensuring no further incidents. The initial shock slowly gave way to a nervous, almost manic energy. A constant murmur of hushed conversations filled the air, each passenger recounting their own terrifying perspective of the events. I sat back in my seat, my body aching from the exertion, my mind still racing, replaying the frantic moments in an endless loop. The image of his hand on that door handle, the sheer unholy force he exerted, was burned into my memory like a brand. As we descended through the evening sky, the tension in the cabin was almost unbearable, a coiled spring of anticipation. The moment the wheels touched down with a gentle bump, a wave of spontaneous, heartfelt applause erupted, followed by cheers and relieved shouts. It was a visceral, guttural expression of collective gratitude for our survival, a celebration of life reclaimed. Emergency personnel, paramedics, police officers, and airport security boarded the plane swiftly, their faces grim, their movements precise. They took custody of the man, leading him off the aircraft without a word. We later heard that the FBI would investigate, trying to piece together the details of his motives, the disturbing reality of his mental state remaining murky, a chilling reminder of the unpredictable and often unfathomable nature of humanity. The immediate aftermath, I was hailed as a hero, a label that felt profoundly uncomfortable, almost alien. I hadn't acted out of some grand, self-sacrificing bravery, but out of a primal, guttural instinct to survive, a desperate animalistic need to protect myself and, by extension, everyone else on that plane. The endless handshakes, the grateful looks from strangers, the murmured thank yous that followed me off the plane were overwhelming. But beneath the surface of these accolades, a profound unease lingered. The fragility of our existence, the thin veil between order and chaos, had been laid brutally bare at 30,000 feet. We had all stared into the abyss, and it had stared back. The experience left an indelible mark, a permanent scar on my psyche. For weeks, sleep was a battle, the image of the struggle replaying in vivid, terrifying detail every time I closed my eyes. Every unexpected jolt or sudden sound on subsequent flights would trigger a surge of cold dread, a jolt of anxiety that took minutes to subside. I found myself hyper-aware of my surroundings, more attuned to the subtle cues in people's behavior, forever scanning for the next potential threat, a constant, low-grade vigilance that became a part of my new normal. But amidst the trauma and the lingering anxiety, there was also a profound, unexpected sense of connection with the other passengers. We had faced death together, a shared experience that forged an invisible, unbreakable bond. We were survivors, bound by a moment of collective terror and an equally collective triumph. And in the face of unimaginable fear, ordinary people, a consultant, an ex-military man, a young student, and a brave flight attendant, had found the courage to act, to help, to overcome. The memory of that shared struggle, the collective will to survive, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a powerful, enduring reminder that even in the most terrifying moments, hope and heroism can emerge from the most unexpected places. The skies, once a symbol of peaceful transit and mundane routine, now carried a different, heavier weight, a lingering echo of the terror, but also a profound, almost spiritual appreciation for the preciousness of life, and the extraordinary, often hidden capacity for courage that lies within us all.